Hey everyone, welcome back to the second part of my series where we focus on developer tools that can help developers code more quickly and abstract away the complexity of the underlying infrastructure system. Just as a quick recap, in the first video we talked about an open source tool called S2I, or software to image, that takes a developer source code, analyzes it, and said, hey, here's a containerization strategy for you, and I'll build the container for you and publish it to a destination. And that is largely focused around the inner loop process. And just a recap of what that is, the inner loop is typically a first step for developers of iterating their code, and that is done before, early on in the process, before sharing that code with other developers and with the development team. There's a need to move quickly, but developers typically run up against CI/CD processes that they have to wait on to run to see if things are going to work. Then secondly, there's of course the current paradigm of cloud native microservices that are deployed to a container orchestration system called such as Kubernetes, and with that comes managing dependencies such as Docker files and YAML configuration files. So there's some burden there for developers, and of course that impinges upon time, and time equals money. So developers spend less time coding and more time parsing through those those configuration files and just simply waiting around, which is never a good thing. Now containers, of course, can help because containers just slim down the application's runtime to just the bare minimum binaries required to run that application. But sometimes with containers, you might hear a developer say, well, it was working on my laptop, why isn't it working in the production system? So there's definitely a need for some additional tooling there to sort of abstract that away and try to mimic the development environment and make it as close to the production environment as possible. And that's where OpenShift or ODO can come in and help, because it's a developer-focused CLI for fast microservices, Kubernetes application development. And despite the name, ODO works across different major Kubernetes systems such as AKS or EKS or Rancher, one of those. Pick your Kubernetes system, and ODO will work fine just against all of those. And the objective of ODO is the tool is so that developers spend less time maintaining those messy Docker files and Kubernetes manifests, and more time building that great microservices application. And ODO is very quick too. It will recompile your changes almost immediately so that you can see those. So ODO's value to developers, focusing on the inner loop process, those favorite frameworks, be it PHP or modern ones such as Go, Node.js, Spring Boot, or other frameworks. It is a local tool that you can install, again, and it's also open source. So you don't have to have extensive knowledge of kubectl or the OpenShift OC tool. You can just kind of get going started, and I'll show that in my demonstration. And it allows the developers to more easily manage and build the build and pushing and deployment of the application. And there's also some additional tooling for transitioning to the inner outer loop process. So, and again, finally, just to reiterate, there's no need for developers to dive into the complexity of Kubernetes and YAML configuration files, because ODO largely abstracts a lot of that away, and again makes it as easy as possible on developers. So with that, let's get started. The instructions for the demo that I'm going to do here are on my GitHub page. Okay, so ODO needs some kind of Kubernetes cluster, and Red Hat provides a free sandbox inside of one of their OpenShift clusters. So I'm going to use my free Red Hat account and log into their developer sandbox. Now in the middle there it says build an application in our cost sandbox, so I will click on that. And then I will click on launch your developer sandbox inside of OpenShift. It might take a minute, and then when it'll let you know when it's ready, and then you click on start using your sandbox. And look at that, it takes me right over into a free OpenShift sandbox. Now I need the API key so that ODO again can log in and authenticate against this cluster. So I'll need to expose that. Click on display token, copy that long line there, and then we'll switch to the terminal. Okay, I have successfully logged into my Kubernetes cluster, and now I am ready to push my source code to the Kubernetes cluster. So there's my source code. I'm going to type in ODO init, which will create a dev file. ODO detects that this is a Java file, so I'm going to accept all of the defaults here. All that is correct. Yep, I'll just accept the default name. And now I am ready to push my source code to my Kubernetes cluster and start testing against the system. And as you can see, there's the Kubernetes URL there. And ODO is going to create a pod for me inside of that sandbox and synchronize all of the files inside of the container. And building the container now. And this might take a minute or so. Okay, so if I switch back to the developer sandbox, I'm just going to take a look at inside the logs for the pod. You can see that OpenShift built the source code for me. All that looks good. Did everything it was supposed to do. That's great. And come back to the developer view. Okay, it's running, but now I need to expose my container to the outside world, so I need to create what's called a route. Now I can do this manually, or I can do this through the command line here. To do it manually, I click, or I'll type in a name here. I'll call it Spring Boot example. I won't select a host name. OpenShift will create one automatically, and I need to expose a service. In this case, it's my sample Spring Boot app, which is running on port 8080. Of course, I want to secure that route, and I'll do TLS termination edge and redirect all traffic. And there we go. So if I click on the URL, there it is. Hello world. That is what I was expecting to see in my sample application. Now, if you switch back to the developer view and click on topology, you'll notice now that the icon has been appended with a hyperlink to access the URL. Additionally, you can also use the command line to create that route. This is my preferred method. I just like to use the OC command to quickly create a route. It's just a little bit easier and faster than using the GUI. There we go, OC get routes, and basically creates the same URL as I created using the GUI. All of that's there and accessible there, so I just copy and paste and access that. And again, there it is, hello world. There's my my URL. Okay, finally, let's get to the meat of the matter and show how ODO can quickly make changes. So in my source code here, I'm going to change my little hello world to hello, this is an ODO demo. I'll change or save that change. And then going back to my command prompt, you'll notice that ODO is picking up that change, and it was resyncing my changes to my Kubernetes cluster. And it's rebuilding my container. And we're almost done. Yep, I'm ready to go. So if I switch back to my developer console there, click on that open URL, and there's my simple change. And that's it. that's how you can quickly iterate with Odeo. And once you're done, you just hit Command C and Odeo will terminate the connection.